In our main segment this week here on Mastering Dungeons, we are going to take a look at the best of the old classic AD&D first edition adventure, Tomb of Horrors. This is part of our ongoing series where we are looking at the 5e adventures, hardcover books from Wizards of the Coast, and then looking at the adventures that may have inspired them. And we looked at Tomb of Annihilation before, so we are looking at Tomb of Horrors now.
What a fantastic classic adventure. Because it has one of the most storied histories. And we'll talk about the history in a second, but this is a true polarizing adventure. And what's easy to forget, and I don't even remember it from back in my day, like I know it now, but it's not a thing I knew then, was just how early into AD&D's history this adventure comes out. And how early on in our history this was polarizing, right? Where you could just, in a pre-internet era, just suddenly have your DM pick this up and run it for you and murder you with it. Which is really funny. And so we go to our disclaimer, right? Which is that we're running a positive series, Shawn.
Yeah, we are definitely trying to focus on the positives of these adventures. We do know, and in this case, we are super well aware that these adventures are not perfect. They may contain things that we don't love. They may, even in the long run, be adventures we don't like very much. But we are going to take lessons from them, and we are going to point those out and talk about the design behind them, and hopefully be able to take lessons moving forward with our own DMing and our own playing and our own game design.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that, we will jump into the history of Tomb of Horrors. This adventure was first published in 1978, written by one Gary Gygax. You may have heard of him. The adventure is set in Greyhawk and was a major influence for 5th edition's Tomb of Annihilation, as we discussed last week. Okay, so Teos, what is the history of this polarizing adventure?
Yeah, it begins as a home game at Gary's house, and Gary is watching his characters who've now been playing for a while, right? Because they've been playing the original Dungeons and Dragons version and even things before that, so he knows his players well. And his players are doing things, playing these powerful characters who go into his dungeons and find clever ways to get past everything and go down to the lower levels and get all the treasure and so on. And so he decides to, quote, take his players down a peg, unquote, as they had been feeling rather invincible. So he devised an adventure that could not be bested in traditional ways simply by slaying monsters with sword and spell. We get Robilar, played by Rob Kuntz, who did actually manage to get to the end and escape with a lot of loot, which shows that even Gary was willing to give in a bit because, well, I think you'll agree looking at this design, if you want to be hardcore evil about this, or even just impartial, the chances someone gets through to the end is so low. Other players in the group gave up earlier and thus also lived, so it was only but so much of a killer adventure, even in Gary's home game. Yep. Tomb then became the first ever convention tournament module. We talked about this when we reviewed Against the Giants. It was run at the very first Origins 1 at Johns Hopkins University in July of 1975. Gary's tournament design was said to be inspired by original design sent to him earlier that year by Alan Lucian. It's actually on the very text of the cover, the thank you to him for sending him that information. And when it was printed there at Origins 1, it was in some ways said to be a prototype to figure out what kind of format DMs would even want to run. That's how early on this thing is coming out in our history.
Yeah. Just to be clear, remember, this adventure was published in 78. And it's being run here in 75. Yeah. So you can see that this is much before the actual published adventure there.
Yeah, it's a convention tournament module, before Against the Giants, I think, and I'll have to check that. Um, According to historian Shannon Appelkline, groups of 15 came together to play random characters that were assigned to them in alphabetic order. They ranged from a 4th level fighter to a 12th level magic user. I love that.
Mhm.
Can you imagine the two players sitting next to each other going, wait, what?
Yeah. And they had a scoring system and it was pretty simple. This is about as simple as you can get. How much loot could you get away with by the end of this adventure?
I laughed about this because when I was working with you on the very first rehash of the D&D Open competition, I looked at all the old scoring systems. And when I looked at some of these early ones, I just laughed that this was the completely, there were just so many arbitrary reasons of how a group would win or not. But in fact, someone did win and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can count it, you can score it.
Yes.
And then in 1978, Gary decided to finally turn it into an AD&D module using the code S1, S standing for special.
Mhm.
It was one of the first 7 adventures published, joining the 3G series Giant Adventures and the 3D series Descent Adventures. The venture is for levels 10 to 14. Matching Vault of the Drow is the highest level adventure at that time. There wouldn't be a higher level adventure until the Bloodstone Pass adventures that were released between 1985 and 1988.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been so many sequels, Shawn. Return to the Tomb of Horrors, 2E, it's over there on my shelf. A large box set written in 1998 by Bruce Cordell. The adventure book is 160 pages with a 32-page illustration book, 16-page monster and map book, and more. It includes a reprint of the original in there. That adventure moves forward 20 years and adds more Greyhawk lore, creating the metropolis of Skull City built atop the tomb. There's even a visit to the negative material plane, which you don't often find in adventures. In 3.5, Bruce Cordell again does an update. This is a free online adventure that is basically going back to the original tomb and updating to 3E with some references to Return. And then our good friend Scott Fitzgerald Gray and Ari Marmel, they, for 4th edition, create a version called Tomb of Horrors. This is a 160-page book adventure. The characters visit the Shadowfell and Feywild as part of the experience. The tomb is now 12 levels. It ends in a showdown on the rules plane of Pluton. It's got some amazing things to it. Scott likes talking about this adventure a lot, and with reason, it is a really, really good, fun adventure. And then what about for 5th edition, Shawn?
Oh, 5th edition reprinted and updated the original adventure in Tales from the Yawning Portal. There was an Extra Life fundraiser in 2019 where Wizards created the Infernal Machine Rebuild, which allowed characters to travel to various places, including the tomb, during its construction. There was a novelization of the adventure, an RPGA Rewards adventure, updating the classic to 4th edition, and a D&D Next version that was in Dungeon 213 as part of Dungeons & Dragons Insider Online. Dragon 371 provided the legacy of Acererak, and Dragon 402 discusses Vecna's relationship with Acererak. And of course, the Green Devil Face has become an iconic part of D&D with many representations across the media beyond gaming, including the novel. And if you read the book, Ready Player One, you know that part of that book takes place in the Tomb of Horrors.
Yeah, the movie does a few things like put the Green Devil face on the van, but it's really in the book that, I mean, a big chunk of that book is just walking through the Tomb of Horrors, and you have to sort of solve all of its things to get there, right? And so it's just that nostalgia of the person who had invented this tomb or this challenge in the book and based on the tomb.
Yeah. So that's its history. That leads us up to today. But now we're going to step back in time. We're going to go back to 1978, put on our bell bottoms, and we are going to look at this adventure. So before we get started with the premise and approach, I want to say that we need to give this warning as well. it is impossible to talk about this adventure without talking about the zeitgeist of D&D play at the end of the 70s and at the beginning of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even a tween then, and the memory isn't what it used to be. But prepare yourself to be told what we played like back then, because you can't talk about this adventure. This adventure is a reaction to the play styles back then. So you need to understand that to suss out why this adventure is written as it is and what lessons we might take from it.
Yeah. And you're right about the memory. I mean, it's amazing. When I was a little kid, I thought that memory was because you were young, you didn't have it. And now I realize it's just the passage of time. And
Yeah.
I have iconic memories of certain things, like how we explored the moat house. I really remember that really sharply. But we played a million other adventures that I barely remember what we did and that type of play style. But then enough pieces like, how we did module A2 or how, these other little bits. And I realized, wow, yeah, of course it makes sense that this adventure, Tomb of Horrors, Gary's dealing with this and feels like the players are sort of abusing him. And you have to go back to, we talked about this with Against the Giants, but there was this real feeling that the way you played was the DM was an arbiter, a judge, an impartial referee, right? And this comes from the idea of war games, where often in war games you would argue about what's happening, but some of the games would have an impartial referee, and being impartial was such a thing to win the trust of both sides that you could say, nope, I'm going to say that river can't be crossed by that tank unit, right? This was a big deal to trust. And so that fairness, that impartiality, the understanding what the game wants, not what the players want, it was so strong in that era and influential of everything.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but let's get into the premise of this adventure, which is, hey, you've heard tales of treasure and traps in this place, and you found the hill where it is supposed to be. And so now you're standing on a hill. You don't see any anything really. So what do? Good luck.
Just a hill. And then the art's just kind of funny. Like there's this art of, like some guys like, look, hill, stones on top. And so the very first thing is you might look for a way in and you might not find it. And that's the end of the adventure. Thanks so much for playing.
Yeah. Teos notes here via Shannon Appelkline that this is not cooperative storytelling. It's competitive play. And the DM, as he said, works to be fair. But the idea is that the players and their characters might succeed only if they are lucky and smart. And the word fair has changed its meaning in this zeitgeist since then. Now, in the 21st century, when we say fair, right, the fair is the game master has given us every opportunity to get ourselves out of this situation, right? The idea, the much maligned save or die was a saying over several editions, and it was disliked. You step into this pool, make a saving throw. You failed, you die.
Yeah.
And people said, we can't do that. Game designers said, we can't do that. Even though a portion of the audience liked it and wanted it that way, it slowly swung away from that's not fair. Yeah. Being fair with this adventure is impossible because the adventure itself is not fair. We have to get that point across. Yep. There's a great line from the movie Inherit the Wind based on a play. And it says, you cannot administer a wicked law impartially. You can only destroy. You can only punish. This is a wicked law, this adventure.
Yeah.
There is no fair about it. If you run it fairly, it is no longer what it was meant to be. Your character will die because you as the player might do things that your character might know not to do, but you don't know not to do it. So therefore it gets done. We would say now that's not fair. In the spirit of the times, it was that's the game. You told me what your character did. Your character did it. You didn't ask any questions. You didn't take steps to protect yourself. So therefore, these consequences, these extreme, these ultimate consequences are fair. And that this is not a negative. This is not a negative. This is the play style that was back then.
Yeah.
And it was accepted for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, and most of the challenges here are aimed at players. This was the thing that Gary sort of saw, like, well, if you think that all you need to do is cast that spell, attack this thing, bottleneck them, whatever, good luck, because none of that will matter. There are going to barely be any monsters here. And what I'm actually going to do is challenge you, the player, to figure things out and think through the challenges, but not as in a riddle or puzzle where at the end of it, there's a clear answer and you can say, oh, yes, I should have thought of that. Of course, I agree. This won't be that either. You have to triumph through trial and error, through smarts, through precautions, that kind of thing. The tomb has many meandering and snaking passages. It's hard to decide where to go. Secret doors, alternate passages complicate mapping and finding a true path. There are false ends multiple times. They make you think you won and that you should go home. The adventure has 32 pages only, right? But 20 of them are an illustration booklet. So it's really just one of these tiny, it's a 12-page adventure, very dense. The illustration book is fantastic, really drives play. You get this whole booklet that has all kinds of neat drawings, and sometimes it'll be things like the setup with 3 chests and then what's inside of them gets shown. So it really was an amazing development, again, early on in AD&D's history, to say, here's something that you can do. There are only a few adventures that use that approach, but there have been modern ones, including Tomb of Annihilation, that have used this approach to good effect. And the adventure introduced a Sararak as the Demi-Lich villain. He really doesn't have much lore. There isn't that much that sort of happens in the play sort of really to develop who he is. But later, Return to the Tomb of Horrors, there's a comic book, various things that expand his story. And Shawn, we probably should go back and think, really like some people on our Discord have talked about how they ran this and hated it. And we heard a lot of that as we were growing up as well. So how do we have fun with this adventure?
Yeah. When I ran this adventure for my home group, it had already been out for years. And even though it was pre-internet, still word of mouth and print publication had sort of spoiled some of the things. It had sort of, you knew not to stick your head in certain places or your arm or your face. And so even then, the players were so cautious that they never finished because they were afraid to touch anything. And this is an adventure where you have to touch things to move forward. But if you touch the wrong thing, you die. So in that case, this was a terrible adventure in the setting that I had to run it in, because nobody wanted to do the thing they needed to do to either succeed or fail. And that's what you have to understand about this adventure or any adventure that you write with that's truly lethal. Not, I am going to try to make this hard for my group, but this is lethal in an unfair, to use a modern term, way. We can't go into it with a mindset of win or lose. We have to go with it in the mindset of we are going to have silly fun. And if characters die, let's make a new character. If things go wrong, let's laugh about it. Let's remember it as the fun that it was and the wickedness that it was, and have a plan for moving on.
The way to hate this adventure is to not understand what it is and think as a DM that you're going to provide this huge challenge that your players will love because it's so hard. And lots of things, even Stranger Things, with the way that Eddie DMs is a callback to that era of like, I am the tough DM. Can you beat me? Right. And we can think that's going to be fun. Today's world, it just really, I don't even know that back then it worked particularly well, but
yeah, it wasn't even great back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you bring your favorite character hoping to emerge a hero from this, you're probably going to have a terrible time. And if you're that kind of DM thinking that you're going to challenge them to go, thanks so much from, oh my God, that was so epic, unlikely to be fun. To enjoy this adventure, you need to fully understand what the experience is, and that this is a test of the player more than the character. And your characters might all die horribly, possibly multiple times. And that the fun will be seeing how horribly you die. It's worth saying up front to your group, this is more about traps and figuring things out than monster fights. It's going to be arbitrary, and we're going to laugh our way through this thing as we do it to enjoy a classic challenge, step back in this sort of weird history and figuring things out. And that you're making characters specifically for this that you think of as disposable. This is a great time to give it a funny character name because there isn't a lot of role playing. So, give it the, Johnny Butt Scratch and go in to see how many Johnny Butt Scratches you end up making by the end of the event, right? Just have some fun. As DM, you probably want to review what spells and magic they're bringing. Are they bringing things that are just going to somehow invalidate everything? But also understanding that, the way Robilar survived this was bringing like 15 hirelings with him and having those guys go first and get murderized. So right. I've run this adventure not too long ago. I ran it just before I think it came out in Yawning Portal. There was a couple people when we were talking, a couple players that said, we've never played it. And the rest had been some time, so they didn't super remember everything. So I'm like, let's go and let's just have fun. And we had a blast. And they absolutely thought they had reached the end. And then I said, cool, you leave. But now let's rewind time and pretend you figured out that wasn't the end. And they'll go, what? And we did that one more time. And so we played through just about to the end by the time they had been beaten up enough to go, okay, we get it. We're, just tell us what else is in this place. But they did make it to the sort of big pillared chamber. And again, it was a super fun time. And somebody at some point, got teleported back to the old Green Devil face and just decided I'm jumping in. And, because I think I know what it does, but I'm not sure. And so they jumped in to get that full experience. And yep. Great.
Yeah. So let's talk about the actual text of the adventure itself. So it's a short adventure similar to what we saw with Against the Giants. It is a storied labyrinthine crypt filled with terrible traps. Some clues are given. But even like a legend lore spell, which was the big powerful spell that was like, tell me everything I need to know. And even then it's like, yeah, don't give them anything with a legend lore spell, right? So you can see Gary Gygax's mind working here. Oh, they always cast legend lore. They always know exactly what to do when they go into this. So I'm going to either not give them that information or give them sort of faulty information or cryptic information. So you get to a hill, and it's just a flat-topped hill. No entrances can be seen. You literally have to dig, and not just dig, but dig in a very specific way. And if you do, you can expose a tunnel entrance. Oh, okay, cool. We found it. Well, the first tunnel entrance is a false tunnel. And if you go in, you see doors at the end. And if you go open the doors, the ceiling collapses on you and you take 5 to 50 points of damage. Cool.
Hope you're not playing the level 4 character.
Right, exactly. So, and now I love to think if we were doing this in 5th edition, right, what would we need? We would need, what's the DC on the check, perception check, the investigation check, all this, all that. The thief back in 1st edition would have a percentage chance to find traps, but if they didn't look in the right place, it wasn't I'm going to make a find trap check. It was, where do you look?
Yeah.
And if you don't look in the right place, you don't find the trap. All right. So, okay, you survived that somehow. Oh, that
And
was
the
a false
wording,
entrance.
I'll just add the wording here is that if the roof is prodded with any force, which is a thing you might do
Right.
if you're
That's
worried about it,
exactly,
right?
that's what you have to do in order to get the chance to find the traps. Right. So, yeah, right there, we're like, okay, Gary's had enough of your BS. Here we go. All right. So,
Mhm.
all right, we survived that. So let's dig more. Oh,
And can I
good.
just
We
say,
found, yeah,
even the
yeah,
digging has rules. So
yeah. Yep.
it says something, prodding must be high in order to collapse sufficient material to expose a portion of a tunnel entrance. Once an entrance is exposed, blah, 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 blah. But probing in any other way. So if you don't tell your DM that you're digging like upwards, you somehow aren't going to find it. It's just, there's a lot of funny stuff like this.
Yeah. So you survived the first area. Oh, we're going to prod high again. Okay, good. We found a second hallway. There are doors at the end. Oh, well, obviously that was a false one. Here we go. When you move into the tunnel, you hear a rumbling, and the adventure literally tells the DM to slowly count to 10 with about 1.5 seconds per count.
Love that.
At the end of that 10, a block of stone seals anyone who didn't say that they turn around and ran out. That block falls. What do? Well, no matter what you try, you cannot escape except for the following spells. And they list the spells in the adventure: Disintegrate, Phase Door, Stone to Flesh, Transmute, Rock to Mud, or Wish. If you don't have those spells, your character dies. Straight up.
Yeah. And that's the idea. It's not inviting as we do today, right? That's that concept of fair. We're not inviting you to come up with fun ways to get out. There is a list of the things that are allowed. Don't have it, you're dead, right? And that's so different than today's play. And again, the idea is if you're going to be wanting to do your creative idea and have the DM allow it, you're going to have a bad time in this adventure. But if you now go, okay, so what can I do? Do I have any spells that help? No, you don't. Well, I guess I'm dead. All right, make a new character. And we laugh and have some chips and whatever, take a break, walk around. Then we'll have a fun time.
Yep. Now, if you prod again, you find the third tunnel, which is the actual entrance corridor. So already there's a good chance that you've died at least once, possibly twice, before you actually get to the correct entrance to the tomb. So let's look at the adventure structure. The adventure doesn't have chapters. It just has 33 key locations on the map. And the dungeon is truly labyrinthine. Meandering halls, many secret doors, many false doors, many traps. Sometimes the way forward is actually in a pit that is a trap. So if you avoid the trap and don't fall into the pit, you have no way of finding the way forward. Instead, you would go to one of the traps that will kill your character instantly when you touch it or try to go through it.
Amazing. Just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just the ethos of it is so funny. Like even there's this cloth map that was given out, I think during the early 5e days or late 4e days, I forget. A friend of the show, Greg Marks, gave me a copy. Thank you, Greg. Mm-hmm. And it is written with what is supposed to be instructions from an adventurer, though their name is an anagram of a Sarac. And it actually misleads you in various parts.
Right. Yeah. So that in and of itself is hilarious right there. Not only that, at various points in the adventure, it is likely that characters will get separated and sent to different places. So now not only are you trying to work your way as a player through this dungeon, but you are in different locations, some of which are next to impossible to escape from.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at the best rooms in the tomb.
Yeah.
We're going to start with rooms 3 through 13. What are some of these iconic rooms encounters here, Teos?
We have to start. I'm going to hold up for people on the YouTube the iconic first starting corridor, which is just an overwhelming. If you've seen like Egyptian hieroglyphs, in an Egyptian tomb, it's almost like that, where just every surface is covered with things. And there is, like a painting of like what looked like almost like Anubis like statues holding, a box. And there is like a prisoner painted at a door and all these kinds of things. And so they're literally, and there's a path on the floor. And so you can just imagine as players, what you had to now do is say, hey, I want to do the following, right? Or I want to check this. I want to know this. And one of the things you might look, if you look at this art, you might say that box almost looks three-dimensional that the two statues are holding. Is it? And the answer is actually it is, if you happen to mention it, and you can check it out. And so there are all these things in this picture that you can try to interact with, right? There is like the and the whole description of it's a huge, for the given that there's 12 pages, a big piece of text. It refers to the illustration, talks about the winding paths of red tiles, just the kind of thing that everybody's going to be writing notes and figuring out where to go next.
Yeah. And it's the art here is important to say, because the art uses, it's a dual reason for the art, one positive and one negative. One reason for the art is we want to be, quote, fair. Right. I want you to be able to see what your character sees, so you can then make a decision as your character might, which is revolutionary in the publication of stuff, because this gives you the ability as the game master to not have to answer 50 questions and just hold it up. And that's enticing, right? Especially to players that are visually stimulated or think visually. Yeah. It's all right there. What it also allows you as the game master to do is not answer questions or not point things out. So you can just say, here's what you see. And then the players say, well, I go and I do this. And like, okay, well, you fall into a pit. And the player was like, well, why didn't you tell me that? And you're like, well, that's what you did. All right. And it stops the players from asking something that they might otherwise ask.
Yeah. And it does. I mean, I think one of the things that Gary's doing here is he's writing this text, even the things that you might read out loud are done so that you won't reveal too much, right? He's trying, this is a pre-box text era, but he's almost taking that into account so that you don't give anything away, right? So you look at the illustration and you might think, oh, there's that painted box that's, looks 3D-ish. Oh, you can. Oh, I open it. Well, it's impenetrable darkness. I feel around. There's a lever. I pull it. You fall into a spiked pit trap. So you can think you're doing the right thing and you're not.
Right.
This hallway has 6 or so pits, a concealed door, and several exits, some of which, well, it's an exit stage left, not to the next part of the adventure. There is a painting of a jail cell that can actually be broken through the painted fresco leading to Area 8. That's actually one of the good ways. Near the end of the meandering path, there is a message written in the stone that you only see if you've followed this red brick path that meanders through, by the way, going over several pit traps. So a lot of reason to think, stop following the trap or the path. If you get all the way to the end, you've been reading it, you can get this cryptic set of instructions that are actually pretty reasonable at hints of what you should do throughout the dungeon. The question is whether you kind of be able to follow them. But it does instruct you, for example, to go back to the Tormentor, which is that jail, with a little bit of a hint to break through that fresco of the jail. But you might be tempted by 2 other options at the end of the corridor, Shawn.
Yep. So if you follow the path to the end of the corridor, you find the infamous green face with its open mouth in the form of an oval, completely dark. And literally big enough for you to climb through if you need to. And if you found no other way forward, you might want to even just stick your hand carefully in to see what happens. Well, it's a it's a sphere of annihilation, and you are now dead. So don't do that again.
Yep.
The second is a mist-filled arch with several colored stones around the archway, allowing you to press certain stones to get different effects.
Yeah, and so there are kind of several possibilities. One is you figure out this sequence and you walk on the pathway and you'll go to area 11, which is a 3-armed gargoyle with a broken 4th arm on the floor. And that gargoyle will, this is such an example of the kinds of things in this adventure. If you look carefully at the 3 arms, they have like almost little sockets in them. If you give 3 gems to them, the 3 arms will crush those gems. If you do that 2 more times, so you've given it 9 gems, it will point towards the 4th fallen arm, because in that arm is an invisible gem of seeing, like gem of true seeing, that's there. Right?
But you can't see it.
You can't see it, so you've got
So
to.
unless you actually say, I feel in the palm of the hand of the arm on the floor, then you will feel this invisible gem.
Yeah. So that was if you went the one way, and from there you can get back to the sort of main progression of that you want to be on. So that was actually a good outcome. If you press the stones back up this mist-filled archway, but you don't walk on the path, you are sent back to the beginning of this hall. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you enter this entryway when the mist is still up, having not done this special sequence of stones, you go to area 7, which is a small room with 3 levers. You can either put them all down or all up. You put them all down, you fall 100 feet to a pit with no exit, take your 10d10 damage. And if anybody else were to come in, they would fall on you. Push them all upward, and you reveal a secret trapdoor you can crawl out of if you can get the 10 feet up to it. And that leads to area 13 and to one of the pits in the starting corridor. So you might actually end up back here by being in the starting corridor, falling into a pit, realizing there's a secret thing, walking here, and maybe pulling those levers and falling. And, and this is just the beginning, Shawn. This is just the entranceway corridor.
There are so many wild and fun rooms, right? If you can stomach the damage that you're probably taking as you explore them. There is an actual 4-armed gargoyle to fight, one of the few monsters in this dungeon. When you open the door, it is freed from its stasis. There is a set of linked 10-foot square doors, each doors into 10-foot square rooms that are all linked to each other, many of them secret doors. But you're getting crossbow bolts fired at you as you travel through these connected small rooms. There's a hallway that's somewhat like the first corridor with painted monsters holding colored spheres on the walls. And then there's an actual archway as well. Step through it and you lose all your equipment and you appear nude back at the first corridor. Some of the spheres are illusions that you can crawl through to get to other rooms, and then some are trapped as well, causing spear damage to riddle your body.
Yeah, there's the chamber with 3 chests. One holds snakes. One has a magic ring, but also a dart trap. Another, an animated skeleton. We all get all kinds of pictures of them with them closed and open and so on. Just a lot to each one of these rooms has things that you've got to think through and interact with and figure out how you're going to use it. But that's sort of like a first chunk of, if I hold up the map, it's sort of this first part of the adventure. It's sort of this area here. And then from there, you can go in a lot of different directions that sort of lead towards another sequence of rooms, sort of rooms 14 to 21. A big one is the Chapel of Evil, with an altar that releases a lightning bolt and the altar itself explodes. An archway that changes your gender. This was famous back in the day for changing our characters and forcing us to do things differently from then on. A slot that fits a magic ring and opens a stone gate to further in the dungeon. But that's the kind of room that just that little, chapel, which had cryptic writings and all kinds of things, we would just spend forever looking at that picture, thinking about what to do, talking to the DM about things, and eventually partially dying.
Yep. You get the very long hallway with the illusion that sounds like someone's running away from you. So if you open the door and run after them, there is a counterweight that drops you down and you start to slide and take fire damage. And the further you go, the worse the damage gets, until you're just a cinder. There's a passage in the third of 3 pit traps leading to a series of stairs that culminates in a crypt filled with webs. A skeletal figure rises from its resting place and says, "Who dares disturb the rest of the Sararak?" And then when you defeat the creature, the place begins to shake like it's going to collapse. But this is just an illusion. And the Lich is actually just a zombie But some of the treasure's real. So you might say, oh, we defeated the Sararak. We're going to get out of here before this whole place collapses. Grab the treasure, run, yay. And you've only done like a third of the adventure.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to actually go back to that set of stairs that first led out of that pit trap and search along the wall on the stairs to find the door, that secret door that leads out of there to a laboratory and mummy preparation room. And this is apparently designed, it says in the adventure, to waste time for the players. I guess maybe this is a tournament note left here, So there are two vats. There are many vats, but two of them, one contains a strong acid and another an ochre jelly in it, and each hold half a gold key. The acid vat deals 2 to 5 damage, and you have a 1% cumulative chance per try of finding the key in it.
So in other words, I reach around, roll a percentiles. Did you roll a 1? No. Okay. Take 2 to 5 damage. All right. I do again. All right. 2 to 5 damage. Now you have a 2% chance. So if you roll poorly, you could take, let me see, 200 to 500 acid damage as you try to find the half of the key that you need to continue.
And that's why one of the important DM tips for running this is to have really delicious snacks and drinks so that you can say, hey, everybody, let's take a break and have a little something and not hate me. And then let's sit back down and roll these 1% chance, cumulative chances. There is an agitated chamber, which is full of stuff to look at. It has 2 sort of strange looking curtains, and the room will periodically shake, and that damages you. So, you may want to get out. Also, there are these 2 curtains. One is made of brown mold, one is made of green slime, and they are likely to tear if you happen to be touching them when the floor shakes, and then everybody gets covered in brown mold or green slime. Well, you've got to remove one of them to get to the secret door to the next area, and that'll take you to rooms 22 to 30.
Yeah. In these, you get a mist-filled grotto with a siren inside. You have to save when you breathe the mist or lose all ability to reason until you leave the tomb. So you wanted to think? Well, we got to take you outside. The siren will accompany the party if asked and cast useful spells, but she carries 2 sacks. And if you ask her to come with you, those sacks vanish. If you try to grab one, the other vanishes, and she can cure the mist-caused loss of reason or cause it with her touch.
It's just such a clear, like, I'm trying to mess with you, right? Like, I'm trying to cover all the ways that I could possibly mess with you. There's one that I love the name of, the false true door, because all adventure long, you get this same sort of art of it's just another number 12 of a spear flinging out of the false door. So you find another false door. And this one doesn't actually shoot spears, but you could easily detect it as a false door and go like, okay, let's not open that. But you actually need to open it, doesn't shoot a spear at you, and if you think to check, you will find a passageway beyond that leads to a place with sleep gas, and then this stone juggernaut rolls over you. This was pretty famous. There was one like it in in Temple of Elemental Evil. So, so that's bad. And you'd conclude, well, we shouldn't have gone through there, except that had you just walked in and searched the ground in front of the false door, secret door, you would find a secret floor opening. And there you can go down to take you towards where you need to go and finally reach an adamantite door. Those were the days. Put 3 sword blades in the 3 slits, and it opens only one way, closing in 5 rounds to what's called the pillared throne room, Shawn.
Yep. So the pillared throne room, you might be surprised to know, is filled with pillars. If you touch a pillar, you will levitate and float like a balloon, following a breeze toward a green devil face, which teleports you again nude in the front of the other green devil face in the first hallway, or the blue devil face, which takes you to a room near this pillared room. That room has no water, or has water but no food, and writing that tells you are doomed. This leads to a small room which can be accessed from the pillared room. The small room has weapons on the walls that will fly and attack you, but only a very narrow set of spells can stop them from hacking you to pieces. If you keep entering the room, multiple sets will attack, so you will need several of those very specific spells. And remember, back then you had to memorize the spells before you went in. So if you didn't memorize that spell several times, you would need to take a complete rest and then memorize the spells you need. So much.
Yeah. And then you get to the ebony dais and silver throne that are at the far end. And if you thought there was a lot of weird stuff up until now, well, strap in, because there is here a crown and a scepter. The crown lets you ignore the levitation that happens if you touch those pillars, right? You touch them, you float like a balloon towards one of those two devil faces. This lets you ignore the levitation, but and you see the room as if in normal daylight. But anywhere else, you're blind. And the only way to remove the crown is to touch the scepter to the crown. But Shawn, it has two tips. Touch the silver end to the crown and you die irrecoverably. Touch the gold and you can take off the crown. If you look at the throne, it has a tiny replica of the crown. Touch the silver end of the scepter to it and the throne descends to reveal a passage and we can once again continue. And, this is, again, one of these places where most groups will have been like, okay, this was too hard. We ended here and we headed back. And I think this is where my group ended when I ran it. This is the second place we stopped right here. And
now, just remember that when this ran at Origins 1 at Johns Hopkins University in 1975, there were like 15 characters, right? So a few of them were expendable. By the end, maybe you had 3 left, but somebody got there, by golly.
Yeah, or got to someplace, or gave up when had lunch. And if you were to figure out this thing with touching the right end to the throne descends. You continue on. You get to these steps. And here you find, you can see that there is a key on the steps. It's sort of revealed in the artwork, kind of hard to see. But if you, one problem is there's an antipathy spell on the step. So someone must make the save. It's possible nobody does, but if someone made the save, they can now reach that key. And then perfect. The door has a sort of circular depression and then this keyhole. So, you might be like, well, duh, we got the key. We should put it in the keyhole. Shawn, that would be incorrect. If you do that, you are teleported nude to the first half in front of the green devil mouth. You might just think, well, let's just bash this thing down. If you do that, it bleeds and quickly fills the room with blood. What you have to do is that circular depression. Oh, that fits the golden ball on the scepter. If you even brought that with you. And now that's what opens it. And if you go through, you reach, ta-da, the treasure room, the second false treasure room. There is some good treasure here. So you might, and it looks like the Demilich died. So you might think like, okay, great. We're good. We got to the final tomb. We can leave. You have to think to move one of the statues that are in the corners, requiring 3 persons with strength of 16 higher. So did 3 people with strength 16 plus survive this far? Then you might find a secret door to another passage that's behind one of these statues. And you might go through that passage to a one-way door leading back to where you came. And you have to repeat all these rooms. Or maybe you saw the tiny keyhole and put the first key in it, not the second one, revealing a small chamber. At long last, Shawn, we have found the crypt of Acererak the Demilich, haven't we?
No, because you just see an empty room. But if you look carefully, you find the keyhole, and the second key fits that. You have to turn it 3 times to the right, not twice, and not to the left. Only then the ground starts shaking. And hopefully you move back then, because from below the crypt rises and squashes anything that's still standing there. But as it rises up, you now see the crypt full of dust and bones and a skull and treasure. If you touch the treasure, the dust and bones swirl in the air. They dissipate in 3 rounds, but if you attack it, it gains 1 energy. And that energy gives spells to the creature. And if it reaches 50 energy, it becomes a ghost and attacks. The dust does not, or wavers when it's attacked. So players think they're doing something when they're attacking it, but they're really not. And
Just
God
powering it up.
forbid you touch the skull of a Sararak, because then it rises up and traps the most powerful PC, probably the wizard, in a jewel in its eye socket. And it can do this 8 times because it's got teeth of gems and eyes of gems. So if they keep touching it, they lose their souls, and after which it curses them and teleports anyone else away. And in the theme of very small set of spells, there are spells that can affect this skull. You can attack it, but I think if I remember correctly, it had to be like +5 or better weapons, or this very limited, and I'm talking like 3 or 4 spells that would affect the Demi-Lich.
Yeah.
And guess who doesn't have those spells, Teos?
The pre-gens?
A thief.
Yeah, the thief.
Which you probably would need to get this far into the adventure.
No, it's absolutely nuts. And what you have to think is like, so what probably happens is someone touches it, they get pulled in, and now the party's going to be all in on getting them out. And the only way to get them out is to kill the Demi-Lich, and you're not going to find any other thing that makes you think you can get them out. So you're going to want to fight it. So now you're all in, and you start realizing that, you're doing nothing. Vast number of your turns will probably be spent doing nothing. But if you cast a forget spell, it sinks back down without taking a soul. That's not helpful because you need to somehow beat it, right? A shatter spell does 10 hit points. It has 50. A power word kill will destroy it if it's pronounced from an astral or ethereal magic user. So good luck with that. A fighter with a Vorpal blade, a ranger with a sword of sharpness +5 or Vorpal weapon, a paladin with the like or even a +4 weapon can actually damage it. An exercise spell will cause it to sink in the same way that forget does. Dispel evil does 5 hit points. Holy word does 20. And a thief, love this, slinging one of the large gems found in the crypt will inflict 1 hit point of damage per 10,000 gold pieces of value. And the gem is therefore shattered. And even if it misses, you have to save to see whether it was shattered or not. If you can do the 50 hit points, it has AC -6. If you can do that, you can destroy the skull. And then each gem has to make a save to see whether the soul inside survived. If it does, well, congratulations, you have the soul in the gem that you now will have to use some sort of special spell to get them out and, put them in a cloned body or something else.
Yeah, that,
but you have now beaten
my friends, is the Tomb of Horrors. And what we can take from it, I think, is that players generally like sort of puzzles. They like being challenged a bit to do the cool thing, to figure out that thing, because it makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you have overcome this obstacle.
Yeah.
So any one room could be fun to use as a template for your design.
Yeah.
One after another, when it's very frustrating and very specific. We talk about the guess what the DM is thinking problem. This is guess what the game designer wrote problem. But there are so many wild and cool and fun things in this adventure taken singly that you could have a lot of fun with your group playing with.
Yeah. I mean, there's some things that just like the 3 turns of the key to the right is just even trying to figure out if you had a spell that could somehow give you an answer around this, figuring out how to ask the question correctly to get, feedback on this, to know what to do is just, that would be an incredible challenge. And you're right. Like if you're just doing this for hours on end, you will lose the end of your patience. You'll either need to jump into the green devil face and say, that was fun, thanks so much. Or you're going to need a break or something, because it's a lot, right? It's a lot to go through each of these. And there is still, of course, wiggle room here to say, well, I think what you're asking is, or you could certainly, there's some cases where you could be not the impartial and fair DM. And I have to wonder, if you were to go back and ask, if you could ask Gary and say, did you help them a bit? Because, did Robillard really just think to turn this key 3 times to the right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Maybe
it is a good question. It is a good question. One of the things that I love to do as a game master when I have something like this, just one thing, right? You need to turn the key 3 times to the right, is at some point in the adventure before they get there, they find something written on a piece of paper that says turn 3 times to the right.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what that means, but they feel so awesome.
Yeah.
If they go through 10 more encounters and they're stuck here with a key in the lock and they say, wait, what did that paper say? Turn 3 times. Let's try that. Yeah. That is like the grandest feeling as a player for some of, I remembered this thing. I put 2 and 2 together and got 5, but 5 was actually the right answer.
Yep.
So that's cool.
Yeah, and even if you were to do something like to say, if you found a scrap of paper that said turn 3 times, is it to the right? Is it to the left? If you're going for the spirit of that idea, like, oh no, you want that kind of fun of like we get punished for this, then that's where you could do that, right? You could lean in and leave it open so that the player is like, wait, I think we got to turn it 3 times. Oh, but which direction? And maybe a spell helps you out. Or maybe that's where someone just, does it and realizes too late, oh, we did the wrong thing and we face this, problem. There is an adventure, I think it's called Forgotten Traditions, that Travis wrote, Travis Woodall. And that is a really fun adventure that has some traps in it like that when I ran it at Winter Fantasy, they triggered every single trap and we were laughing, right? The whole time we were laughing because it was sort of comical. In fact, one time the rogue found the trap and I guess misinterpreted what I meant by you find a pressure plate and went and jumped on it, which activated the trap. And we all just died. And everybody's like, why did you jump on it? And she's like, I thought that was like, I don't know. We all just had a big laugh, right? Just because we'd been through so much that at that point it was just hilarity. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we, Teos, have survived the Tomb of Horrors, unlike so many people that came before us. So thank you for sharing your expertise on it.
Thank you, Shawn.
I hope people out there have either fond memories of Tomb of Horrors, or if you get the chance, give it a read through to see what you might steal from it for your own games. Mm-hmm. And I want to thank everybody out there, of course, for listening, especially our patrons who help us keep the gerbils churning here, keep the power flowing through Mastering Dungeons. Thank you to our Master of Dungeon supporters. We appreciate you so much. Our Master of Realm supporters, they get a shout out in our show notes. And our Master of the Multiverse patrons, they get a shout out on the show, as well as that free content that we give away to our listeners. So thank you, Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshops, Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Rudy Chainsaw Basso, Dave Bastiansen, Derek the Bearded GM, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Boschjohn from Duality Press, Calvin Bridges of Alos, Robo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, Dead Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimble Co., Kevin Davis, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ted in Guyana of Frog Helmet Games, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Simon the Hunter, Sean Hurst, Hyperlexic, the Jaunty Mantis TTRPG podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Almighty Jerd, JR of the Twilight Perspective, JT Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Gail Kiermandy, Schwill from Maine, Leftria, Chad Lench, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Jaron from Mathis Arcanum, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, Michael, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Falcon Neil, Tom Nelson, creator of the deck of player safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip and Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacle Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Joe Rosso, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, David Rideout, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simons, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunner Games, Jeff Stevens at jeffstevensgames.com, Josh and Lee Wanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talos the Stormlord, Jeremy Talaman from Masters of Alchemy, Trace, Ryan Truk, Joe Tyler, Earthworm, Marcel de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, Vedwokles G, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Waziak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Ian Wright, and Z. Walt Winfrey. Thank you so much for your support. If you want to join that wonderful crew in supporting us, you can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd. If you can't help us out there, no problem. You can help us out by leaving a review wherever you listen to the show. Go to YouTube and subscribe and give us the thumbs and the stars and the likes and all of that happy stuff. Teos, what have you been up to on your socials?
I have been, I did a video on drops, covering all of it. So you can see exactly how the drops works, how it's like to work with these two maps, VTT offerings, or to look at all the different player content that's there. And lots of thoughts on it. And then my blog series did the last of my series on skill checks and thinking through different games and ways to approach skill checks with the idea of how often should you be rolling for skill checks or calling for rolls as a DM. Where can we find you, Shawn?
You can find me on all the socials at Shawn Merwin, or you can follow the podcast at Mastering D&D on all those same social media outlets. You can also leave us comments on the Mastering Dungeons YouTube channel by going to youtube.com/@masteringdungeons. So we are the worst for wear, but we have made it to at least one of the endings of the Tomb of Horrors. What are we going to do now?
Well, I'm going to give myself a 1% cumulative chance per hour that I'm going to get this next project done.
And that's about 10 times the chances I have of getting mine done.
Good luck.
Luckily, I'm taking poison damage as I do it.